Hello, and welcome to MIT Sloan Alumni Online. Every month, MIT Sloan Alumni Online brings you the latest breaking news, cutting-edge research, groundbreaking ideas, and school updates from MIT Sloan faculty, alumni, and students. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Sharon Mussalli, MBA 14 and Chief Revenue Officer at Some Spider Studios, whose brands include Cafe and Scary Mommy, reaching 180 million people each month. Some Spider is a fast-growing media and entertainment startup that is ranked number 44 on the latest U.S. Media Power Rankings from Shareably. Prior to her role at Some Spider, Sharon served as U.S. Industry Manager Entertainment on the Global Marketing Solutions team at Facebook, based out of the New York office. Sharon brought 14 years of tenure in the entertainment media space to her role at Facebook, having previously served as Director of Digital Media at Clear Channel Media and Entertainment, iHeartRadio. Sharon holds a BA from Tufts University and an MBA from Sloan. Sharon, we're so thrilled to have you here with us today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, and thanks, Betsy, for that introduction. It made me feel very old, 14 years experience, which is true, into that role. So I'm really thrilled to be here talking to you guys, and I really appreciate everyone joining. And I'm excited to talk about the state of today's publishing industry with you all, so hopefully you'll find the interesting, provocative, and interesting as we go through it. As mentioned, I'm the CRO of this distributed media company we call Some Spider Studios, and I'll get more into what a distributed media company is. And when I was at Facebook leading media and entertainment, that's where I learned all the secrets about Facebook Newsfeed, right? The mountain of data that we were sitting on at Facebook and how media companies like the one that I work at now use that information to elicit your engagement. And so once we go through the data and sort of the shocking reveals on what actually is available to us, you might like it, you may love it, or you may hate it, but the reality is media companies likely know more about you than you do yourself. And so the questions that come out of that are, is that insane or is that unethical? But let's start from the beginning and figure out how we got here in the first place. And so, let's go to the next slide. Here we go. So, let's go back in the day, and there was this time where you used to read these things called newspapers. I don't know if everyone remembers that time frame, right? And so every day, teams of writers would wake up, and they would produce content across a range of topics and have their content vetted by somebody named the editor-in-chief, if you remember what that role used to be. They'd approve a final version of a daily edition of a newspaper and then distribute it to everyone. And all of us who received that newspaper got the exact same copy of the paper. We got the same articles and the same headlines in the same positions with the same adjacent ads throughout. It was then our decision as consumers of that content and of that news to make the decision and take that static newspaper and consume the content of our choice. That also created a scenario where there was no feedback loop, right? There was no way to provide feedback on what we were reading or what we were interested in or our response or reaction to advertising to the creators or the advertiser. It was a one-way street, and we all made that decision individually in the comfort of our own homes. And that model all came crashing down, as we know, and got broken. And I would say that the time in which that happened and when it all broke was in 2004. Something happened at that other inferior school in Cambridge where this guy, Mark, built a platform called Facebook. Right? And it eventually broke the entire traditional media industry. And I would say everything from television networks to the way film works, obviously to the way newspaper and print worked, it all came crashing down. And there was one company that I think really seized the opportunity and broke ahead of the pack and changed the way that we in the media industry even thought about content and distribution. And that company was called BuzzFeed. It was born in 2006, and it was born out of the Superior School in Cambridge, founded by a guy named Jonah Peretti, who is a graduate of the MIT Media Lab. And really, these two things are incredibly material when you look at the state of today's media and publishing industry. Jonah and others capitalized on the opportunity to distribute content via social. Basically, it's a choose-your-own-adventure of dynamic content delivery platforms where billions of unique feeds serve content to the right person at the right time, and it's up to you to choose which video or which article to read. So basically, you now, let's go to the next slide. Basically, you now are the editor-in-chief. right, of your own personalized media feed. And if it's on Facebook, and for most people, Facebook now has become the primary source of discovery and their primary news reader. So if it is on Facebook, it's something you check and refresh at least 20 times a day. You spend about 40 minutes a day on Facebook. Each session lasts 2 minutes. And if it's on mobile, 1 out of every 5 minutes is the time spent on Facebook. So as a publisher, I'm telling you, I know from this experience, you are the one calling the shots. You decide what happens in these news feeds, and you decide now which content is important and gets distribution or not. Distributed media companies are only as good and successful as the data that we receive from you. So I talk a lot about distributed media companies, and I preface by saying I work at one, so what exactly is that? Right? So it's a content creator who embraces social platforms. We create content, distribute it on social, and embrace the fact that you may never ever visit our owned and operated properties, which could be the TV network that we may own. It could be a website, obviously, or an app. And we are basically completely fine with the idea that you may not actually make it to our destination. We sell advertising into the content distributed on social. And because the cost of creating social mobile content is a fraction of the cost of producing traditional content, and advertising is much more efficient on social, the margins are actually really great in a distributed media company. So it all works out for us, even if you don't actually ever end up, like I said, on our owned and operated properties. Moving from static to dynamic content delivery extends our reach far beyond the wildest dreams of any traditional media company. And the best way to illustrate that is with this Sean Spicer tweet, right? So who would have thought that I would say that he's the guy that I'm going to refer to really talk about this industry, but this was epic to me, right? At the height of the fake news frenzy, Spicer tweeted this graph in an attempt to take down BuzzFeed. So Alexa traffic rankings show the popularity and the traffic, let's say, of a website. And he is correctly showing you that BuzzFeed.com is crashing, right? No one's going to the website anymore, and it's going, down and to the right, a trend that you would never want under O&O. He was framing it as a sign of failure, when in fact it is the cornerstone of extreme success. By distributing socially, BuzzFeed can say things like 1 out of every 4 videos on Facebook is a tasty video. We need to stop and absorb that unbelievable data point. On a platform of 2 billion people with over 10 billion daily video views, 1 out of every 4 videos on Facebook is a tasty video. To boot, tasty is only 1 out of 100 different channels that BuzzFeed has on Facebook. So you can imagine how much BuzzFeed dominates the consumption of media today by moving to a distributed platform. So today I'm going to pull back the curtain and show you how this whole thing works. Starting with Newsfeed, of the 473 million links shared in Newsfeed weekly, how does the algorithm decide what you should see? And after a publisher reaches you in Newsfeed, we put you in audiences, and I think you'll be surprised by the cohorting available to us. We then use that data, buy additional first-party data, and make ads shockingly smart, all to meet our objectives as publishers. And to top it off, I'll leave you with some fun thoughts about the future. So Newsfeed, at a high level, looks at a number of different signals to decide how to compose your feed. Based on the signals, a relevant score is assigned to every piece of content and every ad, and with every refresh, the process repeats itself. So this is an actual screenshot of my Newsfeed, and I went ahead and sort of determined some relevant scores for different pieces of content. It is very likely, for example, that on a scale of 1 to 10, Mashable would be very important to me, and Scary Mommy is obviously the company at which I work, and so I would assume that would also have a very high relevance score. So some of the signals that have the highest positive correlation to relevance score are the ones that you see listed here. So let's kind of walk through them one by one. The first is who published the content, right? So that would be the page attribution, in this case, Mashable that you're looking at now and or Scary Mommy. What is it? And I'm talking about the actual product when I say that. Is it a video? Is it a link? Is it what's called an instant article, which is a native way of publishing a text article? The platform knows, for example, if you're more likely to watch videos and will optimize for that behavior. When can mean numerous different things, but let's give one example here. If the content's related to a trending topic, for example, it has augmented pickup, right? It'll be more likely to be showing up in people's news feeds. What else did I publish sequentially? So broadly, if I publish 3 videos in a row with similar content, videos 2 and 3 will be deprecated. A company or a publishing or a media brand, I would say, that understands this very well, for example, is the NBA. The NBA mostly produces video on Facebook, but they wisely do not put video number 1 as highlights from last night, video number 2, more highlights from last night, and 3, sort of additional highlights from the game last night. Instead, they'll do highlights, they'll do a clip from a 1980s dunk competition, and then they'll do an interview with LeBron James. Because it's the same product, yet differentiated, they don't have videos 2 and 3 deprecated, to give you an example. Deemed informative. This is actually a new criteria that's been added to the algorithm post the fake news cycle. This is something that was released at F8 in April, and they brought it up to the media and publishing industry at that conference. And so essentially, you will, as a consumer of content now on Facebook, be polled and asked if the article that you just read was informative to you. If the publisher is getting a low score, historically time after time, they will be deprecated in Newsfeed. And if, for example, the Washington Post continues to get high marks from its readers, it will be upspinned in terms of its distribution in Newsfeed. Relative time spent, am I more likely to spend time with, for example, Refinery 29 and spend more time with that brand than I would with something potentially from the Food Network? For me, that's probably true. And I see a lot of content, therefore, from the publishers that I spend a lot of time with. And then relative share ratio also is part of the fake news, let's say, fallout, and a new change that Facebook made and announced at F8, which is really sort of factoring in clickbait and headlines that might incite that kind of behavior. So if you see, for example, a provocative headline, and then you click on it, and then you read that content and then don't share it, Facebook will interpret it as a clickbait headline. And so articles like that will then be deprecated in Newsfeed and be negatively impacted when it comes to their relevance score. Here's some of the things that the algorithm does not do, right? Which I think, for me, actually, when I found out about these things working at Facebook, I found it actually kind of shocking. The first one, semantic analysis, you might think Facebook does. Certainly, they have the capabilities to do it. It's just not part of the analysis that's done on a piece of content today. Semantic analysis is reading the actual articles to understand what they're about. So here is an example of an article that I clicked on my newsfeed a couple of days ago, and using AI, they are not reading the content of the article. Instead, Facebook's only looking at the page attribution, status copy, reactions and comments, and then infers what the content is about. And although visual storytelling has taken over, Newsfeed still doesn't have good enough AI to be able to recognize what's in a photo or a video. And I want to pause on that because you can imagine, Facebook is not only the platform and or Instagram that's moving to content largely being just photos and videos, but obviously we need to address Snapchat as well and the extreme success that that platform is having today with young people. And so platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and so on will definitely have to be able to crack the code to know what's inside of a photo and what's inside of a video to know, for example, if you have a child because you're posting numerous snaps about your child in Snapchat on a daily basis, because no longer will you be adding a life event like you do on Facebook around the birth of a child, and thus could be put inside a mom or a dad or a family targeting cluster. So all of this is definitely happening, and it will come, and you will see that coming from Facebook and Snapchat in the future. And so after all those signals are analyzed and your newsfeed is built in seconds, your consumption behaviors yield rich amounts of data that I can use as a publisher for cohorting and retargeting. I can create audiences of people who viewed my videos, engaged with my content, visited my site or app, are members of my email database, or communicated in messages, private or public, in certain languages. That's all available to us as publishers in terms of targeting for our content. And this is where I think you can start to question whether there's an ethics issue on the table. For example, if I keep sending videos to video viewers and exclude them from text, am I doing something wrong? If I only target people engaging with my content, am I inadvertently hiding content from hundreds of millions of people, or am I just creating a great experience for my audience? Right? This is the debate. And if you think that targeting is questionable, that I just kind of walked through, maybe wasn't aware of all the different ways in which I can target people, you're going to love this. This is my new most favorite find. And so anecdotally, I was sitting out here in the open plan of our office, and our analyst comes running over to me. He does all this analysis in Python, and he actually genuinely thought that he stumbled upon an Easter egg within the Facebook Open API, and somehow we shouldn't be able to see the data that we were looking at. I believed him and started messaging all of my friends that still work there, and lo and behold, this is actually data that we all have access to as page owners and can use in the following example. And so in this open API, on this page, I can see individual reactions, and reactions being what you're seeing over here on the left, be it like or love or angry or haha, by person, by post. It's a little bit hard to read, but basically what this is post-level data that you're seeing. This is an actual screenshot, and it gives the person's name, their Facebook ID, and how they reacted to that content. And so think about it. I can use that Facebook ID, which is PII, personally identifiable information, and create cohorts of targeting based on these reactions. So I can keep feeding funny videos to people who react with ha-ha, for example. And all those people who get angry at my articles, I can exclude them forever if I want. And it goes without saying, I can feed those feelings to my audience on behalf of my advertisers too. Do you want an ad campaign with positive sentiment? Here's an audience of likers that I can sell to you and use that exclusively for targeting. Which leads me to my options as it relates to ad targeting. As I mentioned, we embed advertising into socially distributed content. To optimize performance, we intelligently target people based on some of these signals to achieve the business objectives of the ad campaign. In the Facebook Ads Manager, you can pick from an infinite list of behavior and interests to find out audiences like women 18 to 21 who like Kim Kardashian, who also tend to watch a lot of video. It's very simple, basic stuff. Or with the data that you get from the Facebook SDK is software development kit, you can retarget people who build a basket in your app if you're an e-com company, but never purchase. That's the standard stuff. But what's more interesting is purchase level data and location-based targeting, which I want to sort of double click on and go a little bit more into. So let's start with purchase level data. Right? At this point, I'm telling you, I know a lot about what you're buying, probably in a way I hope that is shocking to you. So this is an actual picture that I took at the CVS near me last weekend. It was on the corner of 7th Ave and Christopher in the Village, and that scanner is a Datalogics scanner. You can see the word Datalogics written across the top. Datalogics is a company that's a part of Oracle, and basically what's happening is in real time, as you scan product across that scanner, the data is being stored in the cloud somewhere, and advertisers, brands, publishers are buying that data to be able to retarget you based on your purchase behaviors. The next to it is a screenshot of an app called Ibotta, which is a company that we work with that's based in Denver, actually, and their head of data and science actually is an MIT Sloan grad as well. Ibotta is a rebate app to you, the consumer. As you can see, they partner with, let's see, it says Gillette and or Amazon and Uber and other brands that you can see on this home screen. And basically what you have to do as a consumer is verify that you purchased the item, let's say the Gillette razors, potentially at Walmart. And to verify that purchase, what you're doing is taking a picture of your receipt in full, uploading it to Ibotta, they check off that you bought the razors, and they give you the $3 back or whatever it may be. But as you're proving your purchases and then obviously sharing your shopping behaviors with Ibotta, they're collecting that information on your entire basket, not just the razors you bought, track your location, warehouse that data on both online and offline purchases, and then obviously make it available once again to people like me. So now in partnership with an advertiser, we, the publisher, can prove whether you purchased an item in response to an ad by matching cohorts of people who were exposed to the advertising with purchasers via this data provided by, for example, Datalogics and Ibotta. We can do competitive conquesting. So I can run Pepsi ads, for example, to Coke buyers. And we can provide dynamic offers to people. For example, a buy one, get one free offer to a lapsed customer. The next section that I'm really excited about in terms of ad targeting is location-based targeting, right? So you all have your location services on all the time. You can never order an Uber otherwise. And there's also something on Facebook called beacons, which is also shown here, where individual stores and businesses can put a Bluetooth beacon to know when you actually walk into a room. It communicates with the phone and your Facebook profile. You have your mobile phone on you all but 2 hours of the waking day. So using the phone obviously as a way of tracking you and your foot traffic is an incredibly effective method of targeting people. With your location services on, we get smarter and smarter as people care about advertising and sales. I know when your phone walks into a Walmart, and I can correlate that, for example, to a recent campaign that I might have run for an in-store promotion at Walmart. I can create an audience of people who already frequent Target and then negatively target them in an effort to attract new customers. And what's really new and most exciting, and again, this is something that Facebook released in May at a publisher summit here in New York, is I can use location data for ad targeting in my smart TV app. The acronym CTV I'm using on the slide is Connected TVs. And so now a connected TV, in partnership with Facebook, would know if you walked into a room because your phone walked into a room, and then I can participate in real-time bidding or have advertisers participate in real-time bidding to bid on you because I know you're standing in the room, standing in front of that smart TV. So these are the secrets of the publishing industry. Maybe some of it you know, maybe some of it hopefully new to you. And if we're doing it right, it's no secret that us as publishers are amassing large audiences and making a lot of money. And there'd be no way to put this all together and better suited for an MIT audience than to, of course, draw some system dynamic loops. How could I not? How can I resist not drawing you a loop? I still have Vensim on my computer. And so without further ado, I have a couple of reinforcing loops for you. So let's do this together, shall we? Starting at the top of the loop with relevant content, that's something that we produce. The more relevant content we produce, and so think high relevance score based on where this whole talk started, the more relevant content, the more engagement in Newsfeed we receive. This is from a publisher's point of view. With more engagement comes greater reach, which means more audience. The larger the audience, the more money we make, obviously, because the more ads we sell, allowing us to produce more content. With all of that engagement, we get more data, and the more data, the more relevant the content, right? So this is the loop as it stands. These are my reinforcing loops from a publisher point of view. But of course, I care about you too. So let's look at what happens from a consumer's point of view. And so remember, I told you I started this whole thing by saying you're the editor-in-chief now. And as the person calling the shots, I'm saying to you that silence is definitely not golden. To expose the breadth of content you want, to have a more fair, balanced, and more relevant newsfeed, you must react. And so these are your balancing and reinforcing loops for you as a consumer of content. So of course, let's walk through them one more time. I'm going to start with content sort of in the upper left corner. And so the more content publishers create, the more positive and negative engagement is created. So you sort of see both variables on there. So think of positive and negative engagement in this way. For example, it's like versus an angry reaction, or a video view versus a skipped video, right? So the more positive engagement there is through the reinforcing loop, the more audience. The larger the audience, the more revenue, allowing for more content production. However, you have a balancing loop in your hands. And so on the negative side of things, negative engagement has negative causal impact on audience, slowing revenue, and content creation. So react if you want to impact the content of your newsfeed and the output of us as publishers. So what's next? I love emojis. I love this slide. It just genuinely makes me happy. I spend a lot of time thinking about micro content like emojis and GIFs. And maybe you'll laugh at it, but I think it's incredibly important. And yes, because I use it quite often in my messages with all of you and my friends and other people. But I believe that emojis are the iconography or hieroglyphics of millennials and Gen Z. I believe they're going to be more important than words because they succinctly express emotion and feelings. And the data already exists to prove this true. Tenor, Jiffy, and Jiffy Cat, and big shout out to Jiffy Cat, the CEO is an MIT grad, my friend Richard Rabab. They each boast a distribution north of 1 billion gifts per day. It's like unbelievable, right? 3 platforms with 1 billion plus gifts per day being distributed via those platforms. In 2016, Jiffy released a study saying that their audience watched 2 million plus hours of GIFs a day. That's unbelievable. A GIF lasts a fraction of a second, and they're getting 2 million plus hours of GIFs a day. And emojis, not to be left out of this conversation, 6 billion of them are sent a day. So I would say that's a whole lot of feelings going out there around between people. And these GIF platforms are already using the data to optimize targeting. They're all partners with Google, and they're partners with Facebook, and many of them aspire to be acquired by those platforms as exit strategies, because it really does help augment the accuracy of the content and the advertising being served to you. So let's walk through an example, right? There's a big difference between searching West Village Pizza on your phone. You're standing on Bleecker Street, corner of Bleecker and 7th, let's say, and you search West Village Pizza. Maybe you do that in Chrome on your phone. But if you, in addition, at the same time, open up GChat and then also send a hangry gif to your friend, you've added an emotion to that search. And of course, Google would see both your Chrome search and then your GChat message to someone. And so they would immediately know through your expression of feeling that you were going to eat pizza right now. And so now you might get search results of things that are closest to you, open now, potentially advertising for a free round of drinks in conjunction with that pizza, because you've expressed an emotion that would have never been shared via your standard search in Chrome or in Safari and other places. So that's it. That's what I've got for you today, and I'm so curious to see how your behaviors may change now that you know all the secrets that I've been able to share with you. No presentation from me would be complete without a science fiction reference, so let's bring it back to the Matrix, and I want to ask you if you're going to take either the red pill, and that means you're actively managing your media consumption, you're seeking out both sides of a story, you're engaging with multiple content types, you're reacting with both positive and negative sentiment, and you're hiding content that's not relevant to you. And if you're a business, you can use that and find arbitrage opportunities to yield positive return on ad spend. Or, of course, you can take the blue pill, and you can live in an analog world, and you can turn off your location services, and you can browse in incognito. But given that I'm talking to an MIT community, I think I know what the answer is from all of you, and I'm saying that's the red pill. And so I would love to hear more from you now, and I'm going to turn this over to Betsy with questions.
Thank you, Sharon. This is really fascinating. As a reminder, please type in your questions in the Q&A box on the right side of the screen. While you're doing that, I'll take a moment to tell you about some of our upcoming MIT Sloan Alumni Online events. Next month, MIT Sloan Alumni Online program will take place on July 11th with Professor Andrew Lowe, who will be speaking about adaptive markets, financial evolution at the speed of thought. In September, Professor Thomas Malone will join us to discuss creating more intelligent organizations. You can register for both of these events on the MIT Sloan Alumni Online website, or stay tuned for future communications from our team with details. Now let's move on to your questions. We'd like to start today's Q&A with some spotlight questions that were submitted during the registration process. Our first question comes from John Barker, MBA 14 in Foster City, California. John asks, where do you see digital media going, and what are some opportunities for disruption?
Yeah, and so the reason why I left Facebook to join a startup was for this, to take advantage of all these disruption opportunities for us startups in the industry. And so some of the big things that we think about on a daily basis are the different platforms. And if you use a reference from the 90s, what are the new cable networks of the future? I often, while I was at Facebook and even now, refer to an LA Times article that still is available through Google search results from 1993, where cable went from analog to digital. And the author of the article said, who needs all these networks? Who needs a home and garden network, right? And we sit here now, you'd laugh, because HGTV is like a runaway success of digital cable, as an example, right? And so there's this vast expansion that continues to happen. For us, and this is not necessarily new, Snapchat, for example, is very interesting. Is Snapchat a cable distributor, for example, for 13 to 17-year-olds? I would argue without question, yes. And so that's an opportunity for media companies moving forward. There's a lot of interesting apps, like I Love House Party, for example. There's also an app called Tribe, where there are one-to-many conversations, people getting into group video chats. Maybe you don't want to talk to 2,000 friends at one time, but you might want to talk to 3. In what ways can we create content on platforms like that and or via messenger bots? And then lastly, I'll say the biggest opportunity for disruption, honestly, is for us to disrupt the legacy traditional media companies. I cannot tell you, I mean, I used to work with TV, so I do know everybody at the big networks, but I cannot tell you how many of them have come to us and said, hey, can you co-create content with us? Because we haven't figured out how to make content relevant for social. Our content is really relevant to, for example, linear TV. And or can we buy content from you because you figured out an economic model that is honestly skinnier, and it's not $5 million an episode anymore for the kind of content you create. How do we do that? And then maybe if it's great, we'll distribute it on linear. Not to mention that we have all the data to know exactly who's watching the videos, what their demographics are, what their view time is, et cetera, which is something you lack, for example, in linear TV.
Thanks, Sharon. That's really interesting to think about. We're moving on to our second spotlight question. This is actually from one of your classmates, Bonnie Beeman, in Renton, Washington. Bonnie's question is, if you were capturing headlines of news stories for the past 2 years that include the publisher and journalist, time, date, picture, and tagging, what types of useful metrics would you glean from this data to discern fake news from true news?
So, hi, Bonnie. So I love this question because it's basically a math problem, and I appreciate us being able to talk about that. So I would say, I mean, I'm going to be like polypragmatic right now and say if I really wanted to look back and decide if something were fake news or a real news story, obviously the data is available to us, right? We know if there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, for example, at this point, and we'd be able to stress test and know if content were real or fake. And so what I think you're doing sort of more, the question is asking at a higher level and more abstract, is you're presenting obviously a number of different variables for one to analyze. And let's say you had this vast repository of information with all of that data. I would suggest adding 2 more columns, real or fake. It's a binary switch, it's a 1 or a 0. And I would do multivariate regression on that, right? If I was looking in a backwards looking way to see which variables are impacting whether or not or positively correlated or negatively correlated in a material way to a story being real or fake. Is it the journalist? Is it the publisher? Is it another variable? Since we all took DMD with Georgia Paracas, I'll also say that where this can be potentially gray is she would say you can always force the numbers to confess, and so I would always be worried about making sure I had the right data set that I was starting with so I didn't make some grand conclusion that was potentially false because I was missing a key variable in that analysis. One can also take that data set forward-looking way, predictive analytics, and use R and think in a predictive way as to which variables, once again, are related to fake or not fake news. And the reason why I wanted to sort of take the response in a hyper-analytical and arguably objective way is because that really is what's happening within the media and entertainment and publishing industries now. It's no longer artists and creators who are just making gut decisions on what to put on TV or what is sound or not sound or what people want to consume or not. There are floors of data scientists sitting at all of these media companies right now doing this type of analysis. We often try and think about which content we'll create that could have a viral effect on its distribution in Twitter or on Facebook or what have you, and there are numerous companies that are doing that, using the data in an objective way to figure out what to produce and using analysis that way. So it's definitely part of what we do in the publishing industry today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on now to some of our questions from our viewers. Our first question is from Sohana Punithakumar, who writes, what determines if a brand is deemed a publisher, and how do brands/publishers balance personalization with creepiness?
What was the last word, sorry? With creepiness?
With creepiness, yes, to be creepy.
Oh, I like creepiness. So that's a great question, right? Now, theoretically, anyone can be a publisher, right? And I would say that even more broadly, if I looked back, I would say that Universal Pictures is as much of a publisher as somebody who has an Instagram account with 10 million followers and have really cute, funny memes. These are all publishers, right? There's no industry organization that puts you in that category or doesn't put you in that category. But I would not underestimate, obviously, the difficulty of amassing a following of 1 million or 2 million or 10 million people. That's actually, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of content. So the second part of the question was creepiness versus, what was the other category?
How do brands and publishers balance personalization with creepiness?
You know, there are some things that you're not allowed to do, for example, on Facebook. And this is with ad targeting, but, you know, it's similar, I would say, from a content perspective. Like, for example, I can't target somebody and put their name in an ad. You may have seen it. I see it too. Those will ultimately get pulled down from the platform. So there are ways in which you can't encroach on the personal data of somebody to the extent where it would make them feel like they know too much about you. Hence why I'm always using the word cohorting, for example. I don't have, for example, the actual emails or names or addresses or whatever of the people in my audience. I just have pools and audiences of people that are relatively broad. For example, video viewers, you know, yes, I said, you know, the reactions based on emotion and so on and so forth. But ironically, Facebook did have some features that we tested and then pulled away while I was there that were quote unquote creepy. For example, you know, a Shazam-like functionality where Shazam obviously listens to the song that you are listening to and tells you who's singing it. We had a product like that, and if you were in the alpha or the beta of that, it would say, hey, it sounds like you're watching Game of Thrones. Do you want to check in saying you're watching Game of Thrones? And that's because it was listening. And so some of those things got pulled back. So I actually think that the biggest policeman in that conversation really is the platform themselves, because Facebook realizes, and they have much more to lose, that if the content becomes a little too personal and they know just a little bit too much about you, you as a user may pull back, which will obviously have a dramatic negative impact on usage and growth.
Okay, thank you. Our next one coming in is from Brian Gannon, who says, as a small startup, how can we baby step into using this data?
Depends on what you want to use it for, if it's a content strategy or if it's for an advertising strategy for marketing. So I'd love to learn more about what you're trying to do on these distributed platforms. But I would say overall, it's incredibly valuable to anyone, any business, if you're a B2B operation or a B2C operation, whatever it might be, to have an audience on social. Just strictly if you think about the stats that I gave in the beginning, which is 2 billion people are on the platform, 10 billion videos are viewed every day, 40 minutes a day is spent on Facebook, 1 out of every 5 minutes on mobile is spent on Facebook. For whatever you're trying to do, who wouldn't want to fish where the fish are and have an audience there and be able to target, understand, and learn their audience, even again, if you have a B2B initiative with your corporation, I would still say that that would be really important. I think some people who do a really good job in this day and age are these content commerce companies. For example, everyone loves Casper. I think they do an unbelievable job of creating content as it relates to their business objectives, which then gets you to be more top of mind, drive awareness of their product, and ultimately sales. The Ladders, for example, even in a radically different business, does a very good job of creating content around job seekers and employment and interview tactics, such that when it becomes time for you to need that in your life, it is top of mind. So potentially that strategy matched with just a presence, be it small or big, would be a great way to start.
Okay, our next one is from Frank Golding, EMBA 13, and he said, when does our next network move to AR or VR MR?
Next network, I'm assuming, Frank, that you're saying platform. You know, when I was at F8 in April in San Jose, that was Mark's big announcement, right? That the camera would be the new way of delivering AR to people, to bring people closer together, facilitate closer relationships between the 2 billion people on the platform. I will say, having sat in the audience on that day, I found it incredibly shocking, because if you remember, all of us saw this very famous photo of Mark walking through a room with the entire audience, I think it was a Samsung conference, if I remember correctly, wearing an Oculus Rift, right, or maybe the Oculus Gear VR at the time, and everybody in VR. And there was a dramatic pivot, if you think about that, from year 1 to year 2, when VR was the predominant new platform and Facebook was wildly focused on that, and CES, and everyone was talking about it. And now we've all moved into AR. So I do think that AR has become, certainly for Snapchat and Facebook, has become one of the primary means of getting people on the platform, increasing their engagement, and there are different ways for us to relate to each other using AR. So I think that has happened, and you'll see it continue to grow. Clearly, Mark got up on stage 2 months ago with that message. And then I know that you probably also watched the Google I/O conference. And in Google I/O, it was all about AI and machine learning, right? And I think those both align with the missions of those two those two very different companies, where Google is organizing the world's data, where ML and AI is incredibly important to that objective, and Facebook is bringing people closer together and creating a community where AR facilitates these really great experiences between people. So I would say that both are leading in different respective ways, not to say that AI is not informing social. For example, a really interesting tidbit that I learned from Facebook was that in the Discover tab in Instagram, as an example, I love this stat, you know, you see a very rich variety of content if you ever go in there, and it's not a wall of selfies. It's beautiful photos and potentially celebrities and sports highlights and so on. And it's because Facebook is using AI to actively take selfies out of the Discover tab. Because in reality, most of what people share on Instagram is selfies, not me, but many other people. And so they're using AI to enhance social experiences and providing diverse content. So I think it's definitely part of the equation for these platforms, and will continue to sort of permeate some of the work that they're putting out there.
Frank has a really interesting follow-up question as well. He says, millennials are accused of being short attention span people, but average YouTube viewing is reaching 40 minutes per person. What kind of content mix is needed to keep a millennially minded viewer engaged?
Right. And so I think, for everybody out here, Frank used to work at YouTube and Google, and so knows a ton about that platform. And interestingly enough, I'll give the counter side of the story from the Facebook perspective and how the two platforms are different, and then address the content question. And so the most recent piece of research that came out from Facebook for Business about a couple weeks ago was that people scroll through a mobile newsfeed 41% faster than they do desktop newsfeed, and most of the activity is on mobile, as you know, for Facebook. The average time spent with an ad on Facebook is like 5.6 seconds, and the average time spent with editorial content on Facebook, video content, is close to 16 and change seconds. So YouTube does a very good job of getting people to that point of 40 minutes per user to spend a lot of time. I would bet, I don't work there, I don't have the data, but I would bet it's 40 minutes via many different short engagements, watching a large number of short videos and or spending a lot of time with a great number of short video clips on that platform. And so to your point, Frank, I totally agree with you. I think millennials do have very short attention span. And so when it comes to Facebook, with this very short duration, we have always said to people, think of the 3-second rule. In what ways can you engage them so that they would actually stop and spend at least 3 seconds with their content? Is that by putting faces in the video up front? People tend to respond to faces. Is it by using subtitling? Is it by putting action up front? Given that Facebook and YouTube are largely consumed on mobile, how does one optimize for mobile? I am a huge fan of vertical video. Obviously, Snapchat is exclusively vertical video. Vertical video, 9:16 video on Facebook has 3 times the engagement of any other kind of video, for example. And so I think it's about creating content in the format that catches one's attention on mobile. Millennials will continue to be mobile first and are cord nevers and may not have a 55-inch TV in their rooms or homes. And then creating content that I believe is entertaining, short, in context, and brief, and that is a direct quote from the 2016 Meeker report, so as to continue to get their attention and be okay with the fact that they'll be watching maybe in a 40-minute span 100 videos instead of in linear TV that could be potentially 2 TV shows.
Okay, great, thank you. So our next question is from Cynthia Gard. She asks, is there a way for a Facebook user to not allow for those reactions to be captured? If so, what does that require? Or direct us to the technical approach that accomplishes that goal.
Nope. Hi, Cynthia. Sorry. No, the reaction data is captured, and there's no way within your privacy settings to turn that off. I would say don't react. But then you're taking the blue pill, so, I don't suggest that.
Okay, thank you. And we have one last question. You talked about the relevance scores. Can you talk a little bit about some of the systems that are being used to calculate relevance scores?
So it's really the Newsfeed algorithm, right? And even when I was there and would go and look at internal documentations as produced by the engineers at Facebook, rightfully so, they did not widely distribute to all 14,000 employees when I was there at the time, you know, the exact secret sauce of the algorithm that determines what is presented in your newsfeed. And so those high-level variables that I identified are basically the extent of even the internal documentation that you could get if you weren't on the newsfeed engineering team, for example. So basically, you know, I don't have the actual equation that is running the algorithm, but those are the variable inputs that influence it. And for people like us, what do? I don't know the exact secret sauce, but I A/B test different strategies, right? And so what we've learned, for example, is you can, for example, produce too much content for your audience. So Scary Mommy, for example, has 3.2 million fans, reaches 100 million people monthly on Facebook, can go up to 140 or 150 million on a given month. And what we found is we are now up to producing 25 pieces of content per day, and we know the reach per piece of content. At some point, we could oversaturate our audience. We could produce, let's say, 35 or 50 pieces of content in one day, and what we would find is decreasing reach, right, with each additional piece of content, because there's only so many pieces of content you can see from me on a given day. And so it's basically, unfortunately, a slightly unscientific testing process through which one goes if they don't actually know exactly which variables have what level of impact on the relevant score and then therefore what you see.
Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us the opportunity to discuss this fascinating and relevant topic. Sloanies and friends of MIT Sloan, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at our future MIT Sloan Alumni online events, which are made possible in part by the Sloan Annual Fund. As today's event closes, please take a moment to complete the brief survey that will automatically pop up on your screen. This will help us to continue to create programming that will be meaningful to you. Thank you so much for joining MIT Sloan Alumni Online.